name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known."
Let us pray. May your words only be spoken, O Lord, and your words only heard. And we do ask this all for your love's precious sake. Amen. Please be seated. Kids Chapel with the lovely Miss Maureen, the lovely Miss Margaret, and maybe that's it. What's that? Paula. That's a beautiful thing. Well, to start off today, now I need to turn my microphone on. Huh, Matt? You told me to turn it off during the singing. What I do? All right, start the sermon off today. What I want you to do is just take 30 seconds and talk to the person next to you and answer this question. Is the world getting better or worse? Is the world getting better or worse? And why? What do you think? Is the world getting, just talk to the person next to you, or in front of you, or behind you. What do you think, Ben? Related to a party or to some action they want us to take. And so when you're using data to spin an agenda, you can use data to the most effective way to motivate people is make them afraid. So if you can say the world's going to hell in a handbasket, that's a powerful motivator. But I think the people that don't have that kind of agenda, who are dedicated just to the empirical interpretation of data, and there are a number of those folks out there, and they come from different persuasions. They come from different political persuasions, but because they're devoted to empirically interpreting data, they tend to come up with the same place. And so when they just look at the data, it really looks like the world is getting better. And in fact, that it's gotten immeasurably better just in the last 50 years. You can think about that in terms, for instance, of prosperity. And this is true in every wealthy country in the world. But just in America in the last 50 years, the average buying power, and this isn't the buying power of the elite we hear so much about, this is the average buying power of ordinary folks like you and me, though actually you and I are probably more like the elite than like the average. But the average buying power of Americans in the last 50 years has increased 3 times. Average buying power of Americans now is 3 times greater than it was 50 years ago. And you know that's true. I mean, any of us who have lived long enough to remember the buying power that we had growing up compared to the buying power that families have now, I mean, just sort of night and day. Houses. Most of us probably grew up in a house that were 12 to 1,500 square feet. 50 years ago, the average house size was about 1,500 square feet. That house size, the average house size, is now double. And of course, in this area, it can be 4 times that. With less people living in the house. I mean, my house, there were 7 people living in that house. Now Linda's in my house, twice the size house we grew up in, but there's only 2 people living in it. So I mean, it's sort of crazy when you really think about it. I mean, an amazing increase in prosperity. Cars. 1 in 5 people had a car 50 years ago. Now there's more cars than people have licenses. There's cars everywhere. And so it's not just material wealth, it's also education. 50 years ago, not everybody who graduated from high school went to college or did some sort of graduate work. Now, virtually everybody who graduates from high school does some sort of post-high school work. And in this area, the figures of people who go to college are like 94.6% or something like that. So, very, very high averages. And believe it or not, it even extends into social things. We might not believe this because, again, it benefits certain people, make us afraid. But if you just look at statistics, the world is a far safer place today than it was when we were growing up. Kids are far safer today than when we were growing up. In part because people are so much aware of what threatens kids, and we've done so much to remove those threats. Violence. The 20th century, when you allow for population growth, was the most peaceful century our race has ever known. Believe it or not, 20th century, most peaceful, less violence than we've ever seen on the face of this planet in the 20th century, when you allow for population growth. Rights. Think about human rights. You think about racism. Now, we have a ways to go in racism. We haven't, we're not the whole way there yet by any stretch of the imagination. But you think of how far we've come in the rights of minorities in the last 50 years. You think of how far we've come in the rights of women and the opportunities before women. You think of how far we've come in terms of civic rights. So we can just go on and on and on. There's so many ways, it seems to me, that if we just look in an empirical way at the data, the statistics, the trends, that the world really is becoming a better place. That said, there's still lots of room for improvement, isn't there? There is still lots and lots of room for improvement. And so, for instance, we might say the 20th century is the most peaceful century we've said, but we still killed enough people through violence in the 20th century to line the planet with bodies 7 times around. So, I mean, that's still way, way too much violence for anybody to be comfortable with that figure. While we may, on average, enjoy far greater buying power than we once did, prosperity, we know that there are still lots and lots of people who don't have the opportunities that we have. Still lots and lots of people who simply do not have the opportunities we have. We know that in the world itself, that basically 1 billion people, 1 in 7 people on the face of this planet, live in such abject poverty that it is not guaranteed that they will live through the day. So we know that the world continues to have some significant problems. And maybe most troubling of all, because it points to something deep, deep inside of us, maybe most troubling of all, is that when we look at these figures, we look at how much better the world is than it was 50 years ago. And we might be inclined to say, man, this is paradise. Except that it hasn't turned out to be that. Because when they judge happiness, and we've become very sophisticated at gauging happiness, life satisfaction, well-being, what they find is there is no increase in happiness, sense of well-being, life satisfaction, in the last 50 years. You'd think that we have it so much better, people would be happier, would have a sense that their lives are better, but in fact that is not the case. You do not see any increase whatsoever. In fact, in a great many cases, you find people who are actually less happy. You find people who actually feel less fulfilled. You actually find people who are less satisfied with their lives. They have everything, but they're less satisfied with their lives. And so, whereas happiness, life satisfaction has not increased, what has increased is anxiety, depression, suicide, and a host of other things. Just this past week, in our neighborhood right here, we had a 15-year-old kid commit suicide. I mean, terrible thing, terrible thing. And the statistics on depression are they're like mind-numbing. And we've become very sophisticated at measuring depression. So they can, when they look at depression and say that depression has increased, 10 times. There's 10 times more depression than there was even 20 years ago. Our ways of measuring can rule out the fact that we've just become more aware of it. We've been measuring it long enough now, we can say that it actually is dramatically increasing. And even scarier
is that whereas 50 years ago, the onset of depression, the earliest it would be measured was in the mid-30s. That would be, you typically have the onset of depression. Now we have, kids 13, 14, 15 years old who are dealing with depression. And sometimes even younger than that. So it speaks of a world where there's lots of good stuff happening, but boy, there's some huge challenges as well. Some huge challenges. And that reminds me very much of the gospel this morning. It reminds me very much of the prologue to John that we just read, where we heard about there being light in the world, that God wants to bring light in the world. That's why He sent Jesus, to bring light into the world. But it's a world that also has a lot of darkness. There's light, there's darkness. And the darkness has never quite understood the light. The darkness has never quite been able to grasp the light. The darkness has never quite been able to get with the light's program, if you will. And so the question that it really raises for us is, are we going to be people who are going to bring light into the world? Are we going to be light bringers? Or are we going to be people who in some way, shape, or form are going to continue to nurture and nourish the darkness in the world? And there's two things that are really interesting about that, just sort of right off the bat. The first one is to say that how do you bring light in the world? You have to turn a light on. You have to light a fire. You have to build a fire. You have to light a candle. How do you bring darkness in the world? You extinguish light. So when we talk about allowing darkness to be in the world, if we don't live up to our full light potential, if you will, then we're bringing darkness into the world. That we're allowing darkness to be present. We're allowing darkness to thrive. It's the old saying by Martin Luther King, what does it take for evil to thrive? Well, it just takes good people doing nothing. Good people doing nothing is what enables, or just pursuing their own little agendas and their own little lives and their own selfish little means. That's what it takes for evil to thrive. So right off the bat, we've got to say, light or darkness. But if it's light, then we've got to pursue light, because if we don't pursue light to the fullest, then we've chosen darkness. By default, we've chosen darkness. And so, light or darkness, we have this choice that's before us. Now, as we decide which of those we're going to serve, whether we're going to be people that bring light into the world or whether we bring darkness into the world, I'm one of those who believes that one of the ways that we bring light into the world, particularly as Christians, is that we bring light into the world through our relationship with Jesus Christ. As we spend time with Jesus, as we get to know Jesus better, as we literally talk with Jesus in prayer and so on and so forth, the values that Jesus held, the principles that Jesus taught, the example that Jesus had, the presence of Jesus within us is able to flow through us, shine through us out into the world, and it's able to bring light to the world. And so part of the way that we bring light to the world as Christians is by simply cultivating our relationship with Jesus Christ. And that becomes a very, very important thing. So how do we do this? How do we let our light shine? Well, here's what I want you to see. In all of our lives, there's two fundamental types of decisions that face us. They talk about them as one-off decisions and as vigilant decisions. One-off decisions are decisions that you make once and you're done. You only have to make that decision once and you're done with it. It doesn't require another decision to get the benefit of it. But vigilant decisions are decisions that to get the benefit from these decisions, you need to pursue them day in and day out. They require us making decision after decision after decision our whole life long. So, for instance, and you know how this works, a one-off decision is joining the gym. I only have to make that decision once. I'm going to join the gym, here's my money, put it down. Or arrange for them to take $20 out of my credit card until I'm dead. All right? Now, getting fit. Is that a one-off decision? That is a vigilant decision. That requires me day in and day out to actually go to the gym. Now, if I approach it as a one-off decision, the gym gets my money, but it never gets me, does it? And I will never get fit. And you can think of the areas in life that are required for a person to thrive, the areas in life that are required for a person to flourish. And this gets really interesting. You look at these statistics, for instance, on depression, particularly depression in kids. You look at the statistics on performance in school, and there's all kinds of interesting things we can tie in on that. But let's take a city like Philadelphia. And this can be duplicated across a broad spectrum. Take a city like Philadelphia. Drive 10 miles down the road, 10 minutes down the road. Now you enter Amish country. And guess what happens to depression rates? They plummet. They drop through the floor. They're virtually non-existent. And so, same air, same water, same food. What's the difference? Why is this population struggling so much with life satisfaction, a sense of well-being, and depression itself? And why is this population seem to be so well satisfied? So, what's different? Well, these are the kind of things that a lot of people think about. And actually, there's great agreement across the board between all the major disciplines, religions, philosophies, sciences. They all pretty much agree. They all pretty much say the same thing. There's certain things in your life that have to be present for you to thrive. And our concepts of modernity, our concepts of prosperity tend to work against those. So, for instance, you have to have good relationships. Good relationships are absolutely essential to a life well lived. We know a person has to have character. That's not very popular anymore, but character, we want to blame a whole lot of other things, but character becomes essential to a life well lived. We know that there needs to be physical fitness to have a life well lived. And all these areas sort of give you choices. You can be fit or you can be unfit. You can be connected in community or you can be alone. And the thing is that to enjoy the benefits of all these areas of life, you've got to make vigilant decisions. If you want to have good relationships, you can't just one day say, I'm going to have a good relationship. No, every single day, you got to devote yourself to that relationship, right? Every single day, you got to devote yourself to it. And everybody's agreed that just like these areas are important in life, our spiritual life is important as well. Now, people will define that differently, but the thing is, across the board, secular research, philosophy, religious research, all of them say the same thing. You got to have a healthy spiritual life if you want to be able to flourish, if you want to be able to thrive in the world. And to have this healthy spiritual life, to let our life shine, requires us to make these kind of vigilant decisions that nurture a spiritual life our whole life long. The problem that we often have with spirituality is that we approach it as a one-time thing. Evangelicals say your prayer of commitment, I accepted Jesus in my life, okay, I'm done. Mainline churches, okay, I was baptized, I'm done. Or I went to church, I received communion, I'm done. Well, it doesn't work that way. It requires a greater level of vigilance. So here's two strategies. We're going to sort of wrap this all up. There's so much more we could say about all this stuff. I mean, it's just tremendously fascinating stuff. But here's two strategies I just kind of want to pull together and leave you with as we come into the year end and we start the new year. One of the best strategies of dealing with vigilant decisions, okay? And tune in now, okay? If you tuned out, I've been sort of rambling going, okay, tune back in, listen to me here. This is really important, all right? So one of the best strategies with dealing with vigilant decisions, the kind of decisions you have to make over and over again, is if you can turn them into one-off decisions, you'll be way ahead of the game. If you can turn the kind of decisions that require daily vigilance into a one-off decision, a one-time decision, then you're way ahead of the game. So if you want to spend time with your kids, that requires vigilance to work kids in. And so if you just leave it to continually making that decision, your kids will probably be neglected. But if you sign up for an activity, week in and week out, that you commit yourselves all to, you've turned it into a one-off. All you have to do is sign up. Now week in and week out, you're committed to it. You spend that time. Well, church is one of those kinds of activities. So if you're wise, if I'm wise, if you want to flourish, if you want to enjoy well-being, if you want to enjoy life satisfaction, what you want to do, what I want to do, what we want to do together is we want to turn our vigilant decisions into one-off decisions, one-time decisions. And so we settle right now that I'm going to be in church, that I'm going to do what I need to do to nourish my spiritual life. You do your part, we'll do our part, all right? I'll do my part. I promise to you. I promise you with everything that is in me, I will, to the best of my ability, to find ways in this year to come to nourish you in your spiritual life, to challenge you in your spiritual life. We're going to do a better job of challenging people in their spiritual life. I mean, I've personally been convicted about that. We're going to give you homework. We're going to work on this deal together. And when we come to the end of 2014, we're going to be healthier not just in body, not just financially, not just in our relationships, but we're going to be healthier in our spiritual life together. So right now, if it's a matter of every Sunday morning, am I going to go to church or not? You hit a morning like this one, it's awfully easy to stay in bed, isn't it? But if you just make the decision, there's no decision, I'm in church Sunday morning, then you go. You've turned a vigilant decision into a one-off decision. All right? Do that. And that'll work all across your life with those kind of vigilant decisions. Second thing is, is nurture. Build practice into your life that nurture those one-off decisions. And so here's your homework this week. I'm going to do it. I hope you'll do it. What I want you to do is I want you to find that quiet place. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Whether it might be a chair in your house before anybody gets up, might be lying in bed at night before your spouse or whoever comes in, or one of your kids comes and jumps on the bed with you. It might be in your office in a cubicle during lunchtime. Find that quiet space. Find 5 minutes of quiet time 3 times this week. What I want you to do, if you're a Christian, I want you to talk to God. I want you to speak to Jesus. If you're not a Christian, I want you to reflect. All right? I just want you to reflect. And I want you to say, I want you to reflect on the difference between light and darkness in your life. How does darkness call to you? How does darkness call to you? How does darkness call to me? The way darkness calls to you is different than the way darkness calls to me. Darkness does call to me. Darkness does call to you. And I'll guarantee you that as you get older, the darkness grows. Because you have all kinds of things that you have to deal with that you didn't deal with when you're younger. Sickness, bodies that don't work like they used to, they're broken down. I was walking with Linda yesterday. She was talking about her mom, and she said, you remember that quote by C.S. Lewis? And I said, no, I don't remember that quote. She said, well, C.S. Lewis said that after his mother died, though he found seas and islands of happiness, little snatches of happiness here and there, it was the great continent of Atlantis had sunk. What a powerful statement. I never understood. I've worked with so many people who've lost, but to hear my wife say it, to know that's what she was feeling, that what she was experiencing, made me think, holy cow. And I think of how many of my friends have lost spouses or loved ones, and how that becomes a character of our life as we get older. And in fact, as we get older, we know with a lot more surety and a lot sooner that we're going to die. There's a great darkness that starts to beset life the older you get. And all of you who are my age and older, you know that. Think of how it is that darkness calls to you. And then think of how it is that light calls to you. How can you unleash light in your life, and light in the world, and in your families, and in our church? What would it mean for you to let the light of Christ shine through you, or simply the light of being an enlightened human being? What does it look like to let the light, that light shine through you? Think about that. So 3 days a week, 5 minutes, just sit down. If you journal, I do, take a journal, write this out and say, here are 2 or 3 ways darkness calls to me. Here are 2 or 3 ways I can bring light. And then in 2014, just say, man, I'm not going to do these things. I am going to do these things. Tell somebody else about them, and help them hold you accountable. But let's together, in the week to come, let's seek God. Let's reflect together. Say, what does it mean for me to live in darkness? What does it mean for me to live in light? What does it mean for me to choose light? And let's choose light. Deal? That wasn't very enthusiastic. Deal? Deal. Amen.